I want you to picture someone you probably know. Maybe it's you. She's 29. She did everything right. Straight A's in high school, chose a practical major, business, biology, communications, whatever they told her had real job prospects. Graduated on time, found a job in her field within 6 months. She's been contributing to her 401k since day one, because that's what the responsible people do. She rents a decent apartment, but keeps an eye on Zillow because buying is the goal. She doesn't blow money on stupid things. No gambling, no impulsive Amazon spirals. She packs her lunch 3 days a week. She has $600 to her name after bills. Every single month. $600. After doing everything right. She's not confused about what happened. She's confused about what she did wrong. Here's the answer nobody is giving her. Nothing. She did nothing wrong. She enrolled in a system that was designed for a completely different economy, followed every instruction perfectly, and arrived at the finish line to find the finish line had moved. My name is Evan, and I spend way too much time thinking about why people who follow the rules end up further behind than people who don't. If you've ever looked at your resume, your degree, your retirement contributions, and your bank account and felt like something doesn't add up, hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Because today we're going to name something most financial content refuses to acknowledge. The good student trap. Here's the core idea. There's a specific set of behaviors that our institutions, schools, banks, employers, parents, agreed to call responsible. Study hard, go to college, get a good job, buy a house, save for retirement. These behaviors were packaged and sold as the guaranteed path to financial security. And they worked, for a while, for certain people. In a specific economic window that closed somewhere around 1990. But nobody updated the packaging. The advice stayed the same. The world it was designed for quietly disappeared, and the people who followed the instructions most faithfully are now the most exposed to the gap between what they were promised and what actually exists. Let's go back to 1980, because the numbers matter here. The average annual cost of a 4-year public university in 1980 was about $3,500, roughly $12,000 in today's dollars. The median household income at the time was around $17,000, or about $58,000 adjusted for inflation. College was expensive, but manageable. A student could work summers, graduate with modest debt, and have it cleared within a few years on an entry-level salary. That was the deal. Study, borrow a little, pay it back quickly, start building. Today, the average annual cost of a 4-year public university is over $27,000 when you include room and board. Tuition costs have increased more than 1,200% since 1980. Median household income has not kept pace, not even close. The debt required to buy the credential has exploded. The credential itself has not. In 1980, a bachelor's degree was a differentiator. Today, it's a baseline requirement for jobs that used to need nothing. The premium you once earned for having a degree has compressed because everyone has one, but the cost to get it has gone the other direction entirely. The good student followed every rule and started the race $35,000 behind. That's just the entry fee. Now let's talk about what happens next. She gets the job. Entry level, $45,000 a year. She's told to contribute at least enough to her 401k to capture the employer match, probably 3 to 4% of her salary. She does it, because that's what responsible people do. What nobody explains is what she actually signed up for. Before the 1980s, most American workers at established companies received a pension. The company managed the money. The company assumed the risk. The worker showed up, did the job for 30 years, and received a guaranteed monthly income for life. Then came the 401k. It was introduced in 1978 as a tax vehicle for executives to defer bonuses. It was never designed to be the primary retirement system for the entire American workforce. But by the late 1980s, corporations realized that replacing pensions with 401ks shifted the risk from the company to the employee, reduced long-term liability, and cut costs significantly. So they did it, across nearly every industry. In under 2 decades, the pension largely disappeared and the 401k became the default. The good student was handed full responsibility for her own retirement in a market she doesn't fully understand at 22 years old, with student loan payments already running in a housing market she can't enter yet. And she was told this was the modern, flexible, better version. Now let's add housing, because this is where the trap fully closes. She's been told to buy. Renting is throwing money away. Real estate always goes up. Build equity. That advice has been on repeat for 4 decades. It came from a period when buying a modest home on one income was genuinely sound and genuinely accessible. Median home price in 1980, adjusted for inflation, roughly $180,000 in today's dollars. Median household income in today's dollars, about $58,000. Price to income ratio, approximately 3 to 1. The rule, spend no more than 3 times your annual income on a home, actually held. Today, the median home price is over $400,000. Median household income is $74,000. Price to income ratio, over 5 to 1 nationally, over 10 to 1 in major cities. The rule is now mathematically impossible for most first-time buyers in most markets. But the advice hasn't changed. Buy. Stop throwing money away on rent. Build equity. She's trying to save a down payment while paying student loans, while contributing to a 401k she was told never to touch, while renting at prices that have also exploded because everyone who can't buy is competing for the same apartments. She is doing every single thing she was told to do, simultaneously. In a market where none of these things were designed to coexist at the same income level at the same time. Here's the math nobody runs for her. $45,000 salary. After federal and state taxes, she takes home roughly $35,000. That's about $2,900 per month. Rent in a mid-tier city, $1,400. Student loan payment on $35,000 in debt at 6%, $390. 401k contribution, $185, deducted pre-tax but still gone. Car payment and transportation, $350. Health insurance after employer contribution, $200. Utilities, phone, internet, $200. That's $2,725 before she buys a single item of food. She has $175 left over for groceries, clothing, medical copays, car repairs, and anything resembling a savings account. She is doing everything right. Now here's the psychological layer. And this is the part nobody ever names. The good student has been conditioned her entire life to interpret financial struggle as personal failure. The framework she was raised inside, school, grades, credentials, performance reviews, is a framework that rewards individual effort and attributes outcomes to individual choices. Work harder, get better results. Study more, score higher. The feedback loop was consistent for 18 years straight. So when the math stops working in her adult life, her first instinct is not, the system has a structural problem. It's, I must be doing something wrong. This is the trap inside the trap. It keeps her optimizing personal behavior inside a broken structure instead of recognizing that the structure itself is the problem. She cancels the streaming subscriptions. She meal preps on Sunday. She reads personal finance threads at midnight, and her account moves from $600 to $720 because she is disciplined and intelligent. Then her car needs tires, and she's back at $600. The individual optimization is real. The problem is that it's being applied to a gap that individual optimization cannot close. The distance between what the rules promise and what they actually deliver was created by policy decisions about tuition, housing, wages, and retirement made over decades, mostly before she was born. She didn't create the gap. She just got handed the shovel and told to fill it. So what does she actually do with this? First, name it correctly. What she's experiencing is not a personal finance failure. It is a structural trap with institutional causes. Naming it accurately stops the self-blame loop and frees up the mental energy she's been spending wondering what's wrong with her. Second, stop building strategy on rules calibrated for a world that no longer exists. The 401k is still worth contributing to for the tax advantage and the match, but it is not a pension. It requires active management and honest retirement math. The degree may still be the entry ticket, but it is not a guarantee. The house may still be the right move eventually, but buying out of obligation to advice written for a 3-to-1 price-to-income market is expensive. Third, understand that the system rewarded good student behavior precisely because the system benefited from it. Colleges needed tuition. Banks needed mortgages. Employers needed workers who'd stay long enough to vest. The advice was never purely for her benefit. It was framed that way. The good student trap isn't about whether you followed the rules. It's about the moment you realize the rules were written for someone else, in a different economy, and handed to you without a disclaimer. She did everything right. Now she gets to build something that actually works for the world she's in.